Yes, I start early. Is that the most cruel one so far? Funny. Children's holidays. Check the mic. Microphone. Boom, boom. Boom, boom. Boom, 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 boom. Boom. Okay, good. That works.
Hello there.
Oh, I'm on video. You can see me.
Yeah, lovely. Down by the beach and all.
I was just ruminating over how cruel this particular distance setting is. So maybe we should have a second sun instead.
I love your virtual background. I know you're really in Wimbledon.
Hey, I should just leave it like this, shouldn't I? It's a bit more fun. It's a really cool background. Look, it's got people running in it.
Yeah.
Oh, I just randomly knew that was going to happen. I didn't see it on the camera at all.
Dear.
Dear, oh dear, indeed. So I saw that Adam may not be able to make it, family birthday party today, but we'll go through a few things. I probably should show you guys a bit of the presentation for Vint as it stands now for commentaries, and then we'll have to have a massive battle over the name. And then I'll tell you what Vint suggested. He has a pretty unique suggestion for the name.
Back again.
There it is. You're muted, Frode.
Yeah.
You're muted. But we can see the lovely beach behind you.
I had hotel Wi-Fi issues, so I'm on my phone now. Yeah, no, here's
All
the
right.
beach.
Yeah.
Look at that. It's dusk.
Yeah.
You see, the whole planet is round. Some people don't know that. That's my fancy coffee, right? So yeah, anyway, I'm on my phone and that should be okay.
So I gather Adam may not make it, and
yes.
I still have to catch up on all of the 20 emails I received over the past 4 or 5 days.
Oh, you're
So
welcome.
I'm doing that right now. I just got back to Sao Paulo. I was at my parents' house for the week.
Oh, okay,
Oh, nice.
That's nice. We were on a boat today and Edgar got a bit boat sick, but the name of the boat was Saint Raphael.
Look at that. That's why my mom gave me that name. It's because of Saint Raphael.
Really?
The Archangel Raphael.
How cute. That's cute. So I wonder, I think Alan will join us because he sent that email.
oh, cool. Okay, I've.
And,
Oh, right.
I'm not sure if I agree with this premise, but it's interesting to see the outline. Sorry, I have to stir my coffee while I'm reading, obviously. All right, why don't we do this for you guys? I'll share screen.
Yeah.
So I'm not too obnoxious, and we'll go through the Vint presentation.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, here's Vint Cerf's suggestion for the name. Are you ready? So yeah, that's how he takes it, right? Okay, so
I think it's how pretty much everyone except Facebook sees it.
So the presentation, it's really, really hard because the event wanted me to show reader, author, and visual meta. That was the brief.
Yeah.
So I try to be as quick as possible, but even being as quick as this is, it's 7 minutes. So I have to cut it down to 6. So I introduce visual meta as quickly as I can with the same style you've seen many times, show them that it's on this document, and then this is all I show about the structure. Say, it looks like visual BibTeX. This bit is BibTeX, and it has more stuff. And then reiterate the importance that it's in an appendix. And then there's a brief video of copy as citation. And then there's a brief video of views, which has, well, you can see most of it here.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Excuse me. And then I show other types of citing, which is both citing the normal way and also copy text from the picture of a book and use that, because that's kind of been wow. And then I show the map view. So this is only the map view in and of itself. Because then I talk about concept mapping specifically. And this is where I decided in the right view, rather than the map view, I do this sentence and defining so that people don't think it's only for the map view. You know how that goes. And then I export to Reader, well, as PDF, open it in Reader. Then I fly through, showing you have some of the same interactions. And this is where I disagree a bit with Alan's email saying that visual meta is essentially a glossary. It does also have these other important attributes such as citation and structure, as I know we agree on here. And then finally, tends to be the bit that's most impressive for people. I showed it to, hello, Alan. Have you seen my virtual background? And this is the virtual background on the other side. Anyway, life is
Are you
tough
in the
and-
metaverse, Frode?
Yeah.
No,
Yes.
I'm not in the metaverse. I'm in the Mediterranean. But it's still a medi,
You're in
right?
you're stuck in the actual verse like the rest of us, Saps.
Yes. And I've been here before. I am very well versed in the normal verse.
I watched that video earlier
I'm
today.
buying Mediterranean .com right now.
I'm just waiting
That's
for someone
clever.
to
That's a
pull off.
great domain, Mediterranean.
Mediterranean, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we're in Cyprus, so it is kind of in the middle, even though it's on the east, middle of the middle. Anyway, I'm on my phone with the internet because the hotel Wi-Fi was a bit iffy. But so, Alan, what we're doing, I'm just going through the presentation for Bint as I have it so far. And I'll just show you the overview. It's pretty simple. He wanted me to show author, reader, and visual meta. So I show the slides of the way I usually start showing it as, this is the meta information book. So this is what we've done with ACM. I zoom in and show only these few screens. It looks like BibTeX. This bit is BibTeX. It contains lots of other stuff, which I can't go in because I don't have time for them. I like the fact that it's really an appendix. And then we go straight into copy and citation. And then there's a brief video of views in author, including, the full screen, but also focus mode, show only bold, show only names, and so on. Then we go into the basics of the map. And after that, I start with concept mapping, where in the right view, I write the whole Hamilton thing because I don't want them to think it's only in the map that you can do the definitions. So I do it there, and then I go into the map view. You all know this. I'm not going to waste your time. So then we export to PDF with visual meta, and the key is to show them that a lot of the interactions you had in author, you can now also do in reader, because visual meta has the headings, and all that structural stuff. So we can pull the document to find and all that. That's when I look at your thoughtful email, Alan, I'm thinking about it's not just glossary. There's a lot of other stuff in visual meta too. You know, most primary being the citing and then the
Right.
structure stuff.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I didn't mean to dismiss visual meta, but to almost like dismiss the nature of hyperbolic speak in all of these tools.
Mm.
Yeah. And then I have this brief slide of this. I think it's just so impressive without going into too much detail, just showing these two different things and talking about this, what it looks like in this context. And then ending with, this is what we're trying to build. And then asking the question, while we're looking at that slide, I said, so you can better imagine possibilities. You know, what can we do? Try to give it to the audience. Yeah.
You had a prompt request yesterday, and sorry, your last 2 weeks have been pretty busy. But I did think about that a little bit. I don't know if it's worth going into, but if not, I can respond in the email about it.
What was that?
It's not much, but I was trying to think of how. So big data is a pretty boring term these days, and nobody really knows what it means, because we know that it's sort of like, well, that doesn't help much because you lost the context, right? And that's sort of what the talk is about. And the only thing that I can compare it to is in The Star Is My Destination. There's the preface is sort of about when people learn to teleport just from place to place, it totally disrupts the culture in all of these unimaginable ways. Like suddenly transportation is not needed, you know, and then the shipment of goods and all of these kinds of things. And so it sort of feels like that, like suddenly learning how to teleport, but I don't know if that's too over the top, but jaunting anyways, at least as a kind of a code word to it. So that was the thought.
I think that's spot on, Alan. I interviewed Howard Rheingold last night, and unfortunately I forgot I was going to interview him, so it was after Singapore Sling, and I gave a slightly quick presentation, but he was also talking about related, not exactly the same, the network effect that'll happen when you have a community using documents that are self-aware in this context. Because your story about distance not mattering is really interesting, because then suddenly other values will matter. In this case, when you no longer have to, when everything is findable, but findable and connected, that's what we're talking about, right? Hi, Peter.
Good morning.
Good morning. I hope you're enjoying my virtual background.
Yeah, I'm all in on
Anyway.
rebranding. I just horrible that he took Meta on us, and we certainly don't want to have people conflating our work with Zuckerface.
Yes. Oh yeah. This picture here you're looking at in the background, I took that of the ship Saint Raphael today. I just thought it was an apt metaphor for what we're trying to do. Literally break new water, and look, it's making a real turbulent mess. This is the name that Ben Cerf suggested. Thought that was kind of funny. Right.
When are we going to start calling things a Zucker? Never mind.
Well, that's what he calls us, you know. The users are Zuckers.
A cluster Zuck is what I was trying to say.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. Right. So, okay. So you're being really provocative, Alan, by the whole teleport thing. But in a way, that is what we have right now on this call. Right, I'm literally sitting in an island in the middle of the Mediterranean, and it makes no difference that one is in New York, one is in Brazil, and somewhere south of England, the other one. So in one sense, we have it, of course, right? And that means a loss of privacy, a loss of free time. For us who are kind of interested in this stuff, that's a benefit, but for other people, it isn't. So it has its positives and negatives, but in terms of you saying it as a provocation for connected self-aware structured documents, there is a lot of crud that is no longer necessary. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, just to carry on the jaunt metaphor for a moment. What's interesting about it, the way they phrase it, is that you can't just teleport into places that you haven't been. You have to know the coordinates. And so the way that they prevent people from teleporting into places is by creating lobbies become mazes.
Say that again.
Right?
What?
So that you can't know how lobbies in buildings become like mazes, so that people can't know how to teleport in, right? And the content of our articles and works today function a lot like these mazes. And so even if you can get to the front door, you can't teleport deeply in because you have to know the context chain where something came from, right? So you wind up having to read X, Y, and Z white papers to get the footnote, right? And what you're trying to do is almost jump. I mean, this is too meaty of a metaphor at this point, but maybe you get the gist. It isn't just like teleporting to different geographies. It's also teleporting to deeply nested contexts.
Yes. So keeping that in the brain, Mark and I had a bit of a discussion on the name earlier today, briefly. And we were looking at the difference between a kind of a consumer view versus a kind of a user developer view. And I hoped that we could find a name that is a little bit aspirational. I am seeing some of the Adobe people next Friday. Andy, who has done the bit that was announced at the Adobe Max this week of embedding provenance in images. His team has been working on that. I'm also meeting Leonard, who is the head of PDF, which is amazing. I think the chance of them, I mean, they've already said they're doing something similar internally, having structure internally, which is great. I think the chance of them saying visual meta is fantastic, of course we'll support it, is not 0, but -%, because they're a big company and lots of things, right? But the thing is just using that as a kind of a use case for a name. We don't want to call it some kind of an acronym or XML or something technical. Ideally, it should be aspirational. I think that smart text is not the way to go because it's been used. Kind of.
Oh, please.
Yeah. But it should.
I don't know what to be like. I admire the enthusiasm, and it's just that I'm sure that we have different contexts, and right now, smart notes, smart text. It's a very indulged word. Yeah. I like visual meta because it is absent of aspiration. That's too severe. It sounds intriguing, but it is value neutral in some ways, which actually puts me at ease. You know what I mean?
There's no hyperbole.
Smart notes. Ugh.
Yeah, I don't mind the name visual meta, and I don't think it competes with the metaverse. If anything, we might just, get more views because it's the same name and end up getting people to find out more about what we're doing. It's like surfing the hype wave with the metaverse.
We could put a little Zuckerberg icon inside the visual meta.
Yeah,
It's part of the metaverse.
Well, there's two things, and I see Peter has his hand up, but one of them is in that kind of a meeting, and I know this is being recorded and will be public, but I want to be able to talk to these nice guys and say something like, we're proposing super extra special nice documents. Why do you want not super extra nice special documents? Right, that's what I'm saying, that if they don't want it, they are saying they want the opposite. I think it's an interesting use case. But the thing about document, we're obviously now trying to put it on the web, including the Atlantic, right, Alan? So it shouldn't be too document centric. It should be about the text, right? Somehow. Not necessarily in the name, but in the meaning.
Yeah, I get that. I'll also say that, like, while I agree with Raphael that I don't think that Facebook's change requires. Oh, I'm sorry, I just talked over. I can hold.
Okay, so you agree with Raphael, but okay, yeah, Peter.
Well, there's that,
Okay.
but I also think that it's worth examining that the name visual meta is also sort of misleading to someone who doesn't understand it. It sounds as if it is more visual, right? So perhaps it is worth examining what is at core here. Something that just crossed my mind, which is a really fantastic term these days that is kind of under the surface, but it's hierarchy as opposed to hierarchy. And it's a great term in complexity sciences in that it means that things don't have a common outline, but they come from various sources, but still fall into a kind of an order, right? So that's just a term to consider. I threw in some other terms in that sketch, but yeah, hierarchy is interesting. I'll stop now.
Thank
Okay,
you, Peter.
I think I lost a little context. It sounded like Alan was suggesting that we put things in Jane spaces.
Oh, you broke up.
Yeah, I was saying it sounded like you were suggesting we put things in Jane spaces when you were talking about lobbies being mazes.
Ah,
So I was suddenly thinking of Jane spaces and hypertext.
that's awesome. It's a fine line between defining or using a term that will be immediately obvious and graspable to various audiences, which is always a problem with this stuff. But I love that thinking.
Yeah. Also, it brings to mind a conversation I had at an IBM Programming Languages Day symposium about 15 years back. I ran into Paul Hudak from the Haskell community, and he was talking about the biggest mistake that they ever made was when they were naming some of the terminology. And he said that, oh, let me think for a minute. Let's see, he was talking about, oh boy, the term of art's escaping me, but that was actually the problem. They picked a very hairy term of art. And as a result, he said it totally unnerved people and they wouldn't use the technology because the name was scary. And he said, we should have called it warm fuzzy thing. And as a result of giving it a name drawn from mathematics, it wound up causing people to assume that the underlying concept was impossible for them to grasp. So the naming is really, really critical to the marketing. And of course, it'll pop into my head as soon as someone else is talking, and then I'll type into the chat what the term was.
That's a very good point, actually, Peter. It has to be both
Oh,
aspirational.
monads. Yes, that was it. He was saying we couldn't have named monads monad. They should have called it warm fuzzy thing, and then it would have caught on.
Sorry, Frode.
No, I
Breaking
was
up.
just, no, I wasn't talking. I was just saying that's a very good point. It has to be aspirational, but not elitist or weird sounding.
Yeah.
I'm thinking maybe something with omni in it, since we want it to be really open to have all kinds of bits of content to come into it.
I'm throwing in just a couple of ones that I was thinking along the same lines, Peter, of like, surely we can do battle in the form of other Latin and prefixes and suffixes, and there's a ton there that have to do with, you know, folding and epi and omni and hyper and auxiliary is actually a perfect term if it wasn't taken, but I think auxiliary is close to what the spirit of what you want, in that it is a supporting structure to the document that's there, and it's augmented, which is the aux, you know.
So the reason why we can't use glossary is because glossary is limited, right? So I think it's it's one of those things where we can either, provide documentation or a new vision for this new digital glossary kind of thing, to reinterpret and give it extra possibilities. So it's a way of updating the term to the current technology, which would be great, because that's one of the problems of skeuomorphism, where if we say a folder, we still think of a physical folder, but a folder is a lot more than a physical folder nowadays. We can have smart folders, we can have different structures, we can have all of these things, but it suffers from one of those skeuomorphic ideals where it's kind of stuck to a past term. So how can we either, because it is beneficial to use the word, for example, glossary, because people already know what a glossary is, but then we want to expand on the possibilities of that word and not just having it frozen on time.
I totally agree with you. And that's in part what I was looking for to name is not the end state, right? Like I always think of visual meta as a spoke to a bicycle or a spoke to another kind of vehicle, right? It is an essential next step, right? But it doesn't have to be also the name of the new vehicle, right? It leads to other kinds of expansion. So thinking of it as a member of an assemblage of things is sort of what I was shooting for. And it also kind of could take the pressure off it rather than thinking of like, this is the pinnacle invention, Yeah.
And the other way of thinking from a branding perspective is where you choose any word whatsoever, and then you embed meaning into that word. Because Apple doesn't mean computers. Apple is a fruit, but Apple computers, they ended up being known as Apple computers. So we can call it carrot data, and it's eventually carrot data will be this next thing because we embedded meaning into that word. So it could basically be anything.
So that's the point. We do need to have our own glossary for different usages. For instance, when we suggest putting it on a website, we probably wouldn't use whatever this is. We would probably have something like augmented copy, which is what Mark and Chris and I was talking about 4 years ago as another thing. So we need our own glossary, but I also think we have to decide, is the key thing that this is something in the back of the document, or is it the key thing, the interactions that it enables?
I think I think it is important to not present it as something that it is not. In fact, I think it's a very valuable and unique product offering to say, this is a pragmatic, stepwise innovation. This can fit agnostic across all, files and formats. This isn't like the kind of bloated speech that you hear with the graph database, distributed thinking, kind of stuff. This is, I like that it's practical. Sorry, what?
No, sorry. Let me just ask you a question then. When we try to do this on the web, a little bit of it might be on the visible web page. Most of it will be hidden in the HTML. So it isn't actually visual anymore. Right. So we have to really think about what that means in this context.
That's exactly where I'm not sure that we need the visual part. And if we don't need the visual part or the meta part, then what is it? I was thinking paradex as a sense of index or codex, etc. But with the para, of course, you can throw in any kind of prefix in there that you want. Para has a nice association with words, but also means beyond and next to, etc.
So thinking about the topic of metaverse, since it's coming up right now. The web and the metaverse will be two different entities, right? You can either choose to navigate on the web or choose to navigate on the metaverse. Because then if we attach things that relate to the web and any metaverse becomes a thing, then it won't feel like it's connected. And it might feel, because visual meta and getting metadata from things. It doesn't matter which platform it is, if it's on the metaverse or the web or physical papers or whatever. So it should be platform agnostic so that people can understand it, working everywhere.
To go full circle, back to Raphael's point, Frode, I would actually stress that be certain that this is a change that needs to be made. And it doesn't need to be made now. I don't think it does. I think the whole world would understand if meta is still in your title and it's okay. So I think we could take the pressure personally off of having to rename it right now.
The reason I'm bringing it up today is partly the whole Zuckerberg thing. It's also partly next Friday. It sharpens our mind to see if there is a viable alternative.
Yes.
And I keep thinking about augmented text. Of course, that's the name of my company, and I could easily change that. It used to be the Liquid Information Company. However, augmented text is augmented in many different ways. What this thing we do together, the visual meta, it really is about the meta, and it is about survivable meta. Because the thing the Adobe guys showed me that they're working on, that's also, of course, meta, but it is embedded inside the document. I think that's the differentiator, because we're not competing with EXIF or any of these things. What we are trying to do is say, when you publish, rather than have a manuscript, the extra stuff that you normally lose, put it in a way that is easily accessible. That's the unique thing. The challenge is, of course, how we do that on web pages. I think we should try to put it at the bottom of a web page. So the visual or surface level or any of that stuff is an aspect. But okay, let's drop it for now. It was a good exercise. I'm happy to keep the visual meta, but now we've gone through a bit of a panic phase, at least I have. And I think if something comes up over the next few days, we'll consider it. Otherwise,
just a very quick thing is that just reminding us that we're ironically in this position because we were in a groovy way shortening metadata to meta, because visual meta is actually visual metadata. Meta has no meaning, it's being used in a cutesy shortened term. If you talk to people about meta, people who work with metadata might guess your meaning, but actually underlying stuff at the moment. We can have fun stuff at the top to draw people in, but I don't think the concept is fundamentally wounded by whatever. We feel a blow.
Oh, okay.
Right.
So I'm going to turn off video because I have to use my phone. The hotel network is kind of bad. Can you guys also, oh, hello, Adam. If you can also turn off your video, then maybe there'll be better bandwidth if you don't mind.
Sure.
Well,
Way ahead of you.
that's a much better picture anyway than this one. Yeah, Peter, you are. Anyway, to quote Hamilton, what did I miss?
We just missed the quote. You actually muted yourself, I think.
Oh yeah, but sorry, what did I miss when I lost connection there? Anything specific?
You were quoting Hamilton, and then we didn't quote.
That was the quote. The quote was, "What did I miss?" Sorry, this is very confusing with these buttons. I'm bad internet. You guys must have talked about something very interesting when I had connection problems. But yeah, Okay, so we're not going to worry about the name for now, right?
I think that's good.
Yeah.
Mm. You might talk with Emily, but I'm sure that something like Japanese must have some really interesting sort of words that don't come with a massive international ballast, that actually have an essence of, you know, containment and containment and breadth.
Mm-hmm.
So we've just been filleting, you know, the Latin and Greek lexicon, which is hardly cutting edge. So maybe it also has a, you know, it might be a way to sort of circle the square in the sense that you know, we can find something that arguably has some meaning, but which just sounds reasonable and short and pronounceable, and, you know, doesn't involve typing some character that's hard to find, all these other things you trip over, having just had my head in ligatures of late.
The thing with Japanese, Mark, to give my 2 cents, is that so Japanese, they have one of the alphabets for words in a foreign language, and usually these words are a Japanization of an English term. So, for example, the word adventure becomes adobencha, and then, you know, it's still the same word, it's just written differently. So one way of coming up with these different words is, you know, it's going to be the same word, but with a different reading. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily a new word.
We can make our own English words up.
Yes.
Too bad Apple and Claris beat us to bento.
Yes. Yeah. Well, it's bento now, sadly defunct.
Yeah, no, we can play around with that, but I do think we'll be okay with visual meta for a while. And as Mark said, it is visual metadata. So if we have to, we can, you know, start spelling it out. Visual metadata.
But I think probably the thing to keep a sort of mental track on is the point at which there is so much invested in under sort of the common reference point of VM that it needs to survive. I quote in context the point that, you know, keep bringing up the thing that, yes, VM uses BibTeX at the moment, but we're all well aware it's imperfect. And frankly, as soon as something better comes along that does the task that BibTeX is doing for us at the moment in a better and more robust and simpler way, then, you know, there's no investment other than our time in using BibTeX at the moment. In the same way, if visual meta needs to change, the same as can. But I think what we need to just be mindful is where we've inserted it into the process, because effectively we'll have to do a crawl through and replace those terms. So for instance, any existing visual meta would actually need a recall and replacement if the name changed. I know there is only very
Let's do another topic for a moment. I just to say it, I know there's there were a lot of emails being thrown around earlier. I hope to get to them this weekend and reply. There's definitely been a backlog of thoughts about some of the things that were talked about a couple of weeks ago. But I'm curious if there was any resolution to those conversations.
Oh, well, there's been a lot of things. I mean, actually, just while I'm sharing screen, I just wanted to show this to Adam. Adam, are you still here? Just briefly, since it's okay. Just wanted to show these 2 slides because it's your work. So I end my presentation with showing this. So I did a full screen view in Safari of my work. Don't explain much at all. I had you credited on there, of course. Show a few of these, and then while I have this slide up, I say this stuff is here. I'm basically asking the audience for their thoughts of what it could be. But guys, what do you think of this text on the screen? Docuverse of self-forward documents is not brilliant, and it may relate to some of the earlier conversations, Alan. So maybe you guys have a comment on this.
I dig it.
Good enough for now?
Yep.
Yeah, and they're metaverse ready.
Yep.
F you, Mr. Mark.
Docuverse, that's where we going. Metaverse is last year.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the thing is, I've been pushing, and this is going back to your question, Alan, about some of the emails that I've sent out at least, and that is, I've been pushing Jacob to do this, that, and the other for views. And, you know, I concocted all kinds of fancy things, but I realized more and more that the fancier a view gets, the messier it gets. So I've kind of gone back to trying to simplify things again. And that was a real revelation.
Good, good. Okay. I'm looking forward to seeing what you've got there.
Actually, I can show you one thing. Let me just go here. So, as you know, we have, okay, so here, no, that's clearly not the main document. Yeah, this one is a good one, has lots of things in it. So, you know, when you do command minus now, actually, so this is the key. How do you put extra stuff in and then find it later? So we have this thing, command click on a heading, and I can write a note here about this section. So I think most of you have seen that, but now you don't know it's there. So what we changed, you fold it, and you see there's now an asterisk next to it, but only in folded view. The point of showing you this, even though it seems like a detail, is that different views should show different things quite naturally.
Yes.
You know, here you shouldn't see it, but if you do something highlighted, that should show up here. Because you've specified this is different from normal text, right? But then
do
we
you
started
have these principles written down anywhere?
Not these new principles, no. Well, what happened there?
But I very much like this because it very much chimes with a thing I've been thinking about in terms of, you know, what, you know, it's all very well to say, well, things are going to be remediated or reused or restructured after their initial digital birth. But, you know, how do we deal with that in our writing tools so that we can actually mark, you know, we can put stuff in there that isn't part of effectively the linear, it's not the linear, main linear narrative, but it's stuff we need to be there because even if it's just a note to our future self that as to why things fitted together in the way they did originally or don't now, I think is sort of quite important. And it's perhaps one of the things we'll need to learn writing in the digital age.
Yeah, it's a great point. And one thing that to maybe explore at another time, we all have better Wi-Fi. I'm also kind of sketchy here, so if I jump out, I apologize. But I wouldn't be surprised, or at least what I'm doing today when I read an ebook, is I'm basically reading with my hands, in that I find that I'm highlighting so much more. And if in fact, while I was highlighting, I could say, okay, I want this part and this part that are in the text separate. I want to push them together, and then I want these other things to be sort of indented underneath or to be a subtext. Then I could be structuring things as I read it with my hands, and it's immensely satisfying to at least think about it, take it as far as I can. But if there was a technology that enabled that, I think it'd be interesting to see how it caught on, if it caught on.
Well, there is a little bit of that with the liquid text, which was originally an iPad product.
Yeah, liquid text is a step in that direction for sure.
Yeah,
it's a little too funky, but
it has a different kind of interface method. But yeah, no, it's good.
So what's missing from liquid text in your view? I also tried it, but it really didn't catch on with me. But I still found the ideas intriguing in some way. So what isn't there?
It's just a great question, Adam, and I think actually it'd be great if we put this stuff in text form, so it's not just in video, because it leads to principles. My quick thoughts on it is that it's really satisfying, or actually my quick thoughts on it, I'll preface to say, I think it's important to do that because it applies to what Freud is building, because there are times when you have an affordance that seems very valuable, but then you start to use it too much and it suddenly becomes confusing. So folding, smushing the text together is fun. But then you almost have too many things that you can do inside of liquid text and not enough structure. So I found that I it would become, I was thinking too much about the app and not enough about what I was reading in the app.
Mm-hmm.
But
that's very interesting.
I think honestly, this kind of stuff, it would be awesome if we took these talks as fodder for material to actually write out what we think about it, and that becomes fodder for whatever newsletter.
Yeah, I think there's some good mileage in that. I definitely see this sense of this problem of adding complexity into a view or an interface, and it's the same old thing of trying to get everything above the fold on the newspaper. It's the same problem. They're all these things, they're all good, but the one thing they don't do is they don't all fit in a limited size box, whether that box is a screen, part of a sheet of paper or whatever, or just a part of our mind, and that's the nub of it. So it's what that says to me is two things. One is that the value of metadata is to help you at the point of bridging out from one sort of thought space or view or something to another, because you can't hold it all in your head. And then the sort of the other part of that, sitting with it, is the nature of how you make that transformation from one space out into the next. I don't think adding more does anything more than get us back into another everything bucket where this thing that's very voguish at the moment, you throw everything in a big bucket and just hope like God that some inspiration strikes.
Well, this is a very visual meta discussion, because the whole point of visual meta is to be able to move stuff around. If you make an annotation somewhere, you should own that. It shouldn't be owned by that software, etc. This is the whole thing we have about the copy aspect of visual meta, which is so crucial, which is probably most of what the web visual meta will be. So I would definitely really like to see an environment where we can take a bit from here and a bit from there and literally just drop it in, Adam style on his environment. That you keep as much context as possible. And everybody's talked about context in these fields for decades now, but I think we're developing an idea what it actually means in this context. So yeah, more stuff where Alan can read, move stuff about, but that stuff is then computationally accessible in other places, right? Is that what we're talking about?
Well, that is a great segue to a thing that I was starting to talk about with Adam, and that is like, I think it would be a good exercise to sketch out the analytic landscape, if you will, of what reading and writing entails in 2021. Because there's like a life cycle component, finding, hunting, gathering, an active reading, etc. And it may help to isolate the behaviors and mental models that we're trying to access if we had a kind of a grand map of the territory, which of course would be flawed, but it might help. Oh, and I figured out the name, by the way, Frode, if you're interested. Yeah. Docurama, I think we can all agree, is the right way to go.
Oh, you're such a monkey. We can try
Maybe
that.
Metarama.
I think we should wait until we can do it later and call it a future Docurama. I slightly disagree, by the way, with your earlier thing about writing it up. Yes, I think we should write it up. There's no question about it. But what I was trying to show, and I was a bit unsuccessful, was in the different views that I'm testing, it's really actually seeing it when you need it is such a different thing from thinking it up. Thinking it up is exciting. But,
we're on the same page there.
Yeah, no, I'm sure we are. Exactly. It's like when would I actually click that? So that's why I'm trying to combine things into a sculpture. So you asked about principles. What I have written about is not sculptural hypertext, but sculptural interaction. So that this is a document you can expand and contract and do all of that. That's the thing about it. So that over the last week, I've gone through a whole thing of trying to combine everything into basically the outline that will show anything that is bold. It would show all the names of the document, maybe all the concepts in the document. But as I do that, suddenly it's a mess. So yes, we should do what we say. And I'm glad you agree. And I'm not surprised that we should also try to just find cheap ways to implement and check in.
Yeah, the text part is like, will only work for the things that we're already certain about and can sort of that's a wish for another time, I guess.
I lost most of that. Can you repeat, please? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, well, I was just saying that I'm also similar that in the sculpture aspect for the UI, and I would love to have a playground of text manipulation where I could actually explore and come to a better UI ideas, but without building something from scratch. But I do attempt every so often in Svelte. That's just a wish list for another time, as a playground that we could all sort of discover.
It strikes me that something in that I sort of reads through as I hear and saying that is that the internal mental map of the text in front of us. So the relationships, especially if you look at a linear text, the relationship that you see in that linear text may not be the that sort of highlighting. But effectively, you're drawing your own trail. You're drawing your own thread through it. And so part of it is, how does one capture this? How does one capture it? Indeed, how does one store it? I mean, so is it useful to be able to lay all these threads back over the document? Though I do, when I occasionally turn on something at Kindle and it said, 500,000 people have highlighted it, I'm thinking, oh, we're back in bucket space again. Because that tells me nothing.
Yeah.
Because half of them probably copied it off the people who did because they wanted to look intelligent, So it doesn't really tell you that much, whereas there are some much more subtle things that often happen in the moment, and they're really happening in the human meat space and not in the ones and zero binary space.
Mm-hmm.
So it is I think the playground thing speaks to this. How do we capture these quite evanescent but often so rich and complex skeins that we manage to lay across this text? How do we capture that in a useful and savable fashion? And I don't claim to have the exact answer.
One of the things we've been experimenting with, because I'm trying to build a library for author reader, just a really, really basic reference manager that does need the documents primarily. And we've been looking at how, when you are producing work, you're interested in two prior things. One is stuff you've read that you want to cite, and the other one is notes you've made that you want to include in the document, right? So sometimes a note thought idea comes from a document. It's not the same as just to highlight this is important, but it is, select this stuff and write in the margin, right? So for the select this stuff and write in the margin, the interesting question I'm sure we've all thought about is, where should that go? Should it stay in the document, or should it only be in the document, or should it be in the document and some sort of library? Can you lift it? That's what we're looking at. The idea was to have Command L to lift text and write something about it. And now it is in your management space, but it knows where it came from. So it can be viewed at the point of writing, reading, whatever. So in other words, an in-between place. How does that seem to this discussion?
I think we need to talk about it when we have more material. We have shaky Wi-Fi and not, I want to whiteboard it, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. No worries, no worries.
An interesting point that when you're saying, well, where does this sort of, I was about to say a side note, but let's not reuse terms, but you have this thought, it's associated with something in the document. One affordance of it originally, well, in its original form existing somewhere in the document, is that by the affordance of visual meta, that thought, that note can now be extracted with quite a lot of provenance attached to it, which would seem to me to be a good thing. So, rather than take all my highlights out of Kindle and trying to hope that I can match them back to where they came from, sort of thing, that you could put notes there. One of the questions sort of becomes, and again, it goes very much to whether you're a visual note taker or not. Some people draw all over books, others don't. There's no particular right or wrong, but what it does speak to is sometimes in quite different downstream forms. And which makes me also want to sort of look at, okay, well, how much of what we're encapsulating is, again, basically taking old media forwards? So, for instance, I find I sort of tend to read off the page, and my imagined machine would be something where I could be sort of reading and almost speaking notes to something that we will be capturing contents for me, because I'm a so typist, and I find I find drawing on the medium I'm reading completely destroys my ability to read it. Which is not a sort of a counter argument to the highlighting thing. It's a recommendation of a personal limitation. I literally find I can't concentrate once I've foregrounded something. It pushes everything else in the background, and I'm now lost my coherent sense of the whole.
But Mark, that shouldn't have to be written into the document. You should be able to say, I would like to read this cleanly.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is sort of what I'm saying. And so the nice thing is, I mean, having it attached initially to document seems useful, because if the document has VM or whatever it becomes, then every time you want to take that annotation and move it somewhere else, it's already effectively been pre-set up with additional metadata that supports its, gives it provenance and allows you to use it in a more augmented sense elsewhere, rather than you having to sort of, in essence, take stuff out, then reassemble its provenance outside, because current structures don't allow you to do that.
Just to kind of highlight a little bit of what that's funny, of what I just wrote in the chat, which is not easy to always read, but the idea of having a third space, not to be too Howard Schultz about it, but where you put your thoughts and your citations or whatever, it basically becomes a modern thoughts and thinking space / reference manager that is completely open and structured, so that wherever you get your inspiration and wherever you need it, it can be accessed. That is the kind of thing we're thinking about, right?
1000%, at least in my head, I think that some of these problems are so complex that they can't be done in a single interface, but they can be thrown off in a direction of spaces, right? And so that's, when I hear that, I totally agree that there's a reference manager and almost a meta reference manager. I would love to see, like, the most reductive way to think of it as a tag editor, but it's essentially my own mental model schema space that could structure whatever new tool I'm using. I would just import this, and it would say, okay, I get what you mean by these things, and these things commonly associate, and now but I'll talk about that another time. I'm afraid I have to jump. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, as long as you don't call it another meta thing. Talk to you later.
Yeah. See you.
I should try to wind up too. I'm running on phone data and I'm running low on that. I think today was useful in reaffirming we don't need to worry about the name too much. Does anyone have anything you want to say about the presentation? We can do some more things on Monday. I will not finish before then anyway. Adam, any changes you want to make particularly?
I haven't followed that so much, so not really.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I think the screen recording I did of showing the hypertext space looks really, really nice. I don't think we need to do anything. It's good that we keep talking and thinking in general. I wrote a thing on concepts. I'm just trying to find it there. I'm going to email you guys. I think it relates a little bit to the earlier bits because the reason we use concepts in author and turn it into a glossary is because tags, as I think we've discussed, can get really useless because it's easy to add any tag at any point, but you have there's no effort. But if you make something a concept, you have made an effort to define it. So if you organize your new knowledge around concepts, it makes sense. So maybe that's the kind of in-between space we're thinking about. What do you think? Oh, just
at least
Mark. Sorry,
yeah,
Mark.
Sorry, I'm sorry. No, conscious we're all on voice now. I just voice any. I was just thinking about this thing about the concept and the tag, and thinking about the fact. Well, it strikes me that the tags as we have them now were almost a sort of it was a protest against people who didn't want or couldn't be bothered with structured data systems. At a time when that was where the sort of computer state of the art was. So let's have a bucket of tags, and it's more open, more liberal. So there's all sorts of stuff packed into there. And what do we have now? We just have buckets full of stuff. So I think the idea of a concept being a deliberately thought thing, as opposed to a tag, is actually quite useful.
Thanks. Adam, did you want to say something on that?
Yeah. Hold on, I'm just going to ask them to be quiet. So one thing around tags and concepts that I find very useful is the idea that they have a home in your personal library, that the tags are defined locally and then they are aggregated up to a global space. So less of the global tags, but more of the local space. So you can slice your universe in different ways after the fact or after you've done it, because we have your personal life, different ideas, and you have maybe a different interests and hobbies that may not intersect that much. So promoting tags to the global space can be a bit too much. So I really like the idea of slicing things and defining it locally.
I think that makes a lot of sense. This is one of the difficult things that I'm trying to teach Edgar. Is that something can be this, but it can also be that. It can be many things different. There isn't a truth about an object that's boring or a person. That person can be a police officer, can be a husband, can be a bully, all of these different things. And these different attributes, of course, mean different things in different contexts. So to try to just do a global thing is not very useful. I agree with you, Adam, and also how these are accessed is another issue, of course, as I think you mentioned.
Yeah, because there are so many times when I work in theater, I don't want any programming stuff in there, maybe the other way around, that I want some theater ideas when I think about user interface design, for example, but I don't want technical abbreviations when I do humanities stuff, for example. So it's really important to scope things and have the ability to scope and focus on different areas. Even if it's imperfect, it's better to have some sort of imperfect system where you slice your world a bit.
Yeah, I see your hand, Peter. Just a quick comment on that. I'm glad you mentioned theater, Adam, because I could imagine, roles were, of course, written on rolls. At least that's what they say. That's why people have rolls. I mean, literally rolls of paper. And I can imagine that if you want to make a new player in your movie, you give different characters different versions of the script. Where you say, Dr. Mad Person over there is your hero. And that is the glossary definition for that character. That is a hero. And then you talk to someone else, say that person is your enemy, etc. So if you have this notion of definitions from something to something, like Mark defines it in this way, and so we can do something interesting. Peter?
Yeah, we have to be very careful if we do anything foreign language, though. I was just playing, I found the Unfettered Shogun TV series, which was like my favorite piece of Japanese pop culture television that got presented a few years back on one of the local TV stations with English subtitles. And then I ran that title through an English to Japanese automatic translating system and tried to round trip it. And it went from unfettered, which was how Wikipedia translated the Aberenbo, into uncensored videos when it came back to English. So it's very, very hairy there as far as anything that's going to be machine translated by people. Also, I have a ton of brainstorming ideas I threw into the chat for possible ideas for a new title. I think something that should convey modularity and maybe some sort of a food analogy would help make it consumable for people, but I'm not quite sure what's the best way to go. Maybe we could allude to one of the founders in the field, a Doug something or a Ted something, and mash that up. I remember when I was taking a course at Syracuse on new product development, and it also was echoed in the IP course in the law school in terms of branding and naming things so that you could have a strong trademark. And that was, it was better to come up with artificial glom together names than anything that was currently used, because the more unique it is, the stronger the legal protections are that you'll be able to get attached to it. Something relatively, so the main underlying concept for trademark law is to avoid confusion in the mind of the consumers, which is all the more reason why you don't want to have anything with Meta attached to it after Facebook's big move. Because of course, we could probably win and say that Facebook was intruding on a market that we were developing, but realistically, whichever side can afford to throw more lawyers at an issue is going to win.
Oh, I mean, I wouldn't mind them buying us out. Give us $1 million, I'll change it to chocolate orange if they like.
Oh, now that works for me.
Yeah, obviously it's a different thing, the consumer facing. Very few consumers will say, I want visual meta. That's not going to happen. But they're going to be like, why is this document dead? The different software people have different ways of doing it. But kind of on that note, let's adjourn until Monday. And yeah, I think we need to think more about how to do this on the web. Peter, you've had many thoughts on that. And we've looked at some simple stuff. Good.
Enjoy the tropics. I'm jealous.
It's not tropical. It's well, it's quite far south. It's only.
It looks tropical with the palm trees behind you there.
Yeah, I know. It's a resort.
He's in the metaverse.
This is true. Millidugs of visual meta. That's funny. Yeah, the dialogue for online understanding. That was a discussion forum I tried to make many years ago. Doug. All right. Well, thank you guys. We'll keep on trucking.
Okay. Safe travels, Rod.
One more thing I forgot to mention. I did show this to Howard Rheingold yesterday. He thought it was absolutely amazing. Very nice. I showed it to Ted Nelson last Friday, and he was like, this has nothing to do with me. It's like, yes, I know, Ted. What do you think? I think teaching people new stuff is hard. And the fact that you also have software that you make money off means you have a conflict of interest. It's like, not really. It's a proof of concept. It's completely open. Anyway, absolutely not a single positive comment from lovely Ted, as expected. But I'm glad we had the discussion.
Well, at least with Ted, you know where you stand, which is wrong.
This is true. And on that note, bye guys. Have a good weekend.
Okay, bye.
Okay,
Have a
bye-bye.
super time. Enjoy the rest of the holes.
Will do.
Talk to you Monday.